Hello and welcome to another live Q&A on a Thursday night. I'm really pleased today or this evening to be joined by a couple of my colleagues. We've got Richard Owen from the assessment team. Evening, Richard. How's your day been so far?
Evening. Today's been a good day, Sam. Thank you very much. Nice visit. Some good sites and a good QS. So if he's listening, well done.
Brilliant. Yeah, you can give him a mention if you want. It's up to you.
I'm not going to name drop him. He'll be blushing for the week.
No, that's good. And also we're joined by a colleague from the technical services team, Mark Barnes-Ryder. How's your day been, Mark?
Yeah, hi Sam. Yeah, no, very good day. Spent quite a chunk of it covering the technical helpline. So if there's anybody watching tonight that I've spoken to on the helpline today, hello again. And then I was looking at some field team reports this afternoon. So no, it's been a good day. And the weather's dry and sunny, so good all round.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Well, without any further ado, we'll rattle into it. We just need to go through a bit of housekeeping first of all. So we do have to say that we will try and offer advice and guidance on the questions asked tonight, but our guidance will be limited by the extent of information provided in the question. We can't and don't assume any liability for any loss or damage caused by an error or omission in the advice and guidance given, and that's whether that error or omission is the result of negligence or any other case. If we do make reference to legislation, it's not to be considered legal advice, and most importantly, individuals must rely on their own skill and judgment when making use of the guidance. I would just say please do start to put your questions in the chat. We're eagerly await those, and that's the whole purpose. You know, the whole idea of these live Q&A sessions is nobody knows it all, but we've all got a bit, and so we can all help each other out to everything BS 7671 and electrical installation wise. There's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. So, you know, a really good way to learn is to ask those questions that you've always wanted an answer to, or you've never understood the answer that was initially given. So yeah, please do post your questions into the chat. Be respectful to each other in the chat, because yeah, the real aim of tonight is we're trying to help each other. So first of all, we'll have a look at question of the week that we posted out. It's been a short week because it's only Wednesday, so we posted this question out on Monday, and we had a bit of a chat offline, off camera, before we started tonight. So, is placing out of arm's reach an acceptable protective measure for electrical dodgems or bumper cars at a fairground amusement park? And when we had a little look at the LinkedIn post earlier today, we could see that about 48% had gone for yes, so just under half, but very closely 28% had said no, 23% had said it's not specified in BS 7671. So what's our thoughts there, Rich? What is the right answer? Is placing out of reach an acceptable protective measure?
It actually is. It is specified in BS 7671 in section 740. It's in the special locations, and placing out of reach, it means that the electrical contact with the dodgems is out of arm's reach. And if you look at the dodgems when they're sort of going around, you've got this rod. It's quite a funny one because I can't remember the last time I was on a dodgem car, but yeah, you got this rod that goes quite high up, and you'll see arcing. So placing out of reach is a method of protection against electric shock, but it does come with the additional note in 740.55.9 that the voltage is extra low voltage, i.e. 50 volts max, 120 volts DC, 50 volts AC. And yeah, it's got to come from a electrical separated source. So the primary and the secondary are completely separate, i.e. a double wound transformer, or motor / generator set. So and the voltage is quite important.
Yeah, and we talked off camera at the beginning about, you know, we're all familiar from those days when we perhaps did go, we could see it there sparking, so we knew there was some energy. I have to admit, until I delved into 7671, I didn't realise it was limited to 50 volts AC or 120 DC. You just assume it's normal mains voltage, but yeah, can certainly see it and can certainly verify it was up high. It was part of the stand of the thing, wasn't it? So it was deliberately made so you couldn't have access to that grid that was powered. Okay.
Yeah, got me reading that one, did I tell you?
Yeah. Hey, it's every day. How many times do we say to ourselves we're looking for something in the big book, and we find something else that we didn't realise was there, and it's like, oh my God! It's a daily occurrence. Every day's a school day, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay, while people are putting their questions together in the chat, we'll have a look at some ones that were held over from previous. So the first one in that respect is to do with residential park homes. Mark, the question was, do electrical installations within those residential park homes, do they fall within the special location requirements in 708 for caravan and camping parks?
No, is the answer to that, Sam. The Section 708 is concerned with the electrical supply to either the hookup or the hard wiring, you know, that goes into a residential or one of those static homes. So it does go on to say in Note 3, I think, that the electrical installation of residential park homes are covered by the general requirements of 7671, and together with any applicable special location. So I mean that means that if it's got a room containing a bath or shower, then you could apply the additional requirements of Section 701 as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not the same, is it? Because we haven't got a moving room. We haven't got a caravan that's going to be frequently connected and disconnected from supply. So yeah, it is treated very differently to the installations within the caravan, although there might be some similarities. But yeah, as you say, it's more like a typical domestic residential dwelling because it's permanent.
Yeah, and I should say also that Section 708 covers things like tents as well, and supplies to tents and park homes and similar living, I suppose, locations, if you like. So it's not just for the static homes and the caravans as we know it. It does apply to tents as well.
Yeah. Just coming back to that first one, someone's put in the chat, if it's 50 volts, why place out of reach? And if it's supplied via a safety isolating transformer? Well, I think it's to do with the fact that because it's that external influence and it is a fairground ride that's moved about, so you've got perhaps maintenance issues. So you've got the double belt and braces thing of out and reach and 50 volts to give you that additional protection against the perceived risk, which is greater because it's outdoors, it's being regularly moved and constructed and taken apart. So I think it is just a double. You'll find that a lot with some of the special locations because of the perceived greater risk. They quite often have that belt and braces approach. So yeah, good question, and we think that's the reason, because of the perceived enhanced risk.
We mentioned when we were talking about it before, but the level of voltages which are deemed to be fatal, and 50 volts is AC is the upper limit of voltage which they believe you can survive from as well, and in terms of amongst current that actually does the damage. But the pressure applied, it would be in the voltage. Anything that's sort of low voltage goes into low voltage, likely to kill.
Yeah.
So it's they've put a voltage limit on that as well.
Yeah, spot on. Okay, another one that we often get asked, do I need to provide RCD protection for a 16 amp 3-phase socket outlet? So is that requirement for RCD protection on socket outlets applicable to 3-phase socket outlets? And I think Rich is going to have a go at this one for us, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I'll have a go at this. Yeah, this is all to do with regulation 411.3.3. The simple answer to this is yes. It doesn't matter whether the socket is a 3-phase socket or single-phase socket. It's to do with the current rating. The reg talks about sockets up to 32 amps, and it gives 3 indents. Rated currents not exceeding 32 amps in locations where they are liable to be used by persons of capability BA1, BA3, or children, in brackets BA2, BA3. And those, to understand what the BA bits mean, those are in they're in Appendix 5. Extent, influences where they categorise BA1, I believe, as ordinary people, unskilled, and so that they put people in brackets of skill. And of course, the next indent is about socket outlets with rated currents not exceeding 32 amps in other locations, and then finally for mobile equipment with a rated current not exceeding 32 amps for use outdoors. So it's anything, RCDs on anything that can be used outdoors from a sort of plug set up to 32 amps. The socket that they're talking about is commando. A lot of people sort of think they're just talking about 1362, but they're talking about other BSENs on sockets as well, because it's the way we would tend to use them portably, and it's up to 32 amps. There is a caveat. The first indent is really about domestic situations, I suppose. And then, of course, you've got the use outdoors, which is anywhere, which is the third situation. But other places where it might not be for use outdoors, it might be commercial. There's this thing about the risk assessment, which is sort of put together in conjunction with a electrically skilled person as well, where it can be deemed that the RCD protection, 30 milliamp RCD protection, is not necessary. But I've waffled on a little bit on this one. In answer to the question, that 16 amp 3-phase socket outlet does require additional protection, 30 milliamp RCD.
Yeah, I think it's some people get a little bit confused in that, is it just limited to single phase? No. Some people get a little bit confused. Is it just limited to 13, general 3-pin socket outlets and plugs? No. Yeah. It's any socket, as you say, that's rated up to 32 amps. So we think of it as a normal domestic 13 amp socket outlet, but it is all.
Exactly. We have round pin sockets as well. I mean, this was to cover a whole gamut of sockets. I mean, and as I said, it's not just the commandos, the commando type sockets that we use. It's really about the way these sort of things are used, the plug set and the additional risk to people in terms of how they're handling equipment that they might have and plug in on it. And so it's to protect the user.
Okay. Please do. We've got some questions coming in, which is good to see. Please do post your questions in. We'll just finish off some of these others before we look at those. So again, one that comes into the helpline quite often Mark, can people still use BS3036 rewirable fuses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're still in table 41.2 with the sort of general purpose fuses and the other ones, including 3036 fuse wire. They're if you're condition reporting and you see them on an installation, it's on page 22, I think, of the best practice guide 4, where it places it in the myth section of the best practice guide 4. So they can still provide adequate fault protection. 432.4 says characteristics of things like 60898 breakers, 60947 MCBs, and 3036 fuses have to meet certain characteristics. So it's still listed. You'd have to be careful when you're sort of condition reporting, or if you want to use them in terms of overload protection, because we still have to use that 0.725 factor. That's where, as I say, where you're considering them for use for adequate overload protection, you'd have to consider that, use that 0.725 factor still, that we're all probably familiar with from our dim and distant college days. Yeah. So the short answer is yes, Sam, you can. They're still adequate. Yeah,
spot on. Another good one that we get from time to time. Rich, can I use a single conductor to bond both gas and water? So if I've got an installation where both those services are in one location, and perhaps my MET or the board is in a further location, can I run one conductor out to bond to both those services? What's our thoughts there?
Yeah, you can use the one conductor. It just requires to be unbroken, so that if it falls off one point, let's say, or becomes loose from one point, you haven't lost the whole bond. So it's often what we call it's a continuous bond. You see it actually more and more where things are close together. More often than not, people run a separate one. But where you've got your gas and your water, let's say, for instance, in the same vicinity, there's no reason why that can't be a continuous conductor. And the key things are that it's in the correct places, within 600 a point of entry and before any T, so that you're bonding the entire bits. And of course, it's the labelling, do not remove, which is the BS951. Yeah, BS951, if I'm right. Notice that should be affixed on it to tell people that it is a safety connection. And using durable terminations, things like crimps, to make sure that, even if loose, it's still on the clamp. Another thing I'd point out as well, believe it or not, often people miss this, those things need to be up to a certain torque. It's actually in the instructions. I've seen it. I was reading it on instructions of what the other day. It's something that split me myself, that, it's about tightness as well, but they do loosen. So you want them to stay in place and that people don't remove them.
Yeah. It was sort of always described to me as it's got to be continuous, like you say. So you can't cut and join, because then if somebody were to take away the first service, so for example, if the first service pipework was originally metal, and then the water service provider changes that pipework to plastic and throws away your connection, if you've then cut and joined it, you'll have lost connection to the second service.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it is possible, but it's all to do with, as Rich said, you've got to make sure that there's no detrimental effect about any foreseeable operation carried out on either of the services that's going to make your your joint connection not appropriate for bonding. So yeah, not cut and joined, but continuous is acceptable.
I think it's taken from the earthing standards as well, Sam, if I remember rightly, BS 7430, that it says in there somewhere that you can actually, it needs to be made continuous, but you can use one bond. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll take one more before we dive into the pot that's coming in today. A really good one and a pertinent one for some of the things that's happening at the moment. So somebody's asked, before undertaking an EICR, would we recommend a site survey for a site if you've not worked there before? What's our guidance on that, Mark?
Yeah, so absolutely, and in actual fact, there is a regulation, BS 651.1, that says if you haven't got any previous documentation to carry out, well, it says a electrical installation investigation of an electrical installation shall be undertaken. So it's a shall, bold letters, underlined. And it's to help with things like, I mean, it's particularly important on sort of large installations because, it could take you a long time to find out where sort of any earthing, any bonding is located. Also things like confirming if there's any sort of maintenance regimes in place, sussing out any areas that you perhaps can't get access to. And consideration of the appropriate sampling as well, things like that. So confirmation of access to particular bits of equipment as well. So as I say, it's particularly important on large sites that's carried out. And then the reg goes on to say that wherever possible, you should have consult previous documentation if those records are available. I know we're talking that these records aren't available, but where they are available, then you should use those previous records to compare the installation as it was then, because that can help you track any sort of deterioration over time.
No, it's really key, and as you say, I think it's one of those regulations that a lot of people aren't aware of, because it is a shall. And so it says if there's no documentation and you've not got an understanding of the installation, it's a shall, you must do a site survey before you start work. And hopefully then that will avoid you having to limit things because you are unaware of them. It will avoid even things like, unidentified circuits, because you'll be able to see, well, does the documentation match what's in the board? So yeah, that's invaluable really, and then it means that you're best prepared for the actual periodic inspection process.
Yeah, and also, I mean, one more thing is you can use it to see if there's adequate points of isolation, because some installations you might not be able to isolate them adequately to carry out the test in the first place. So that would be a good one to find before you actually turn up to do the actual condition report.
Yeah. Okay, we'll delve into the questions that have come in, because we've got quite a few, and we'll see how many we can get through. First one is really a bit about NICEIC certification and joining. So the audience member said, I'm taking the plunge and going self-employed after working for the same guy for 13 years. I haven't done my 2391 yet, but we'll be getting it booked ASAP. Until then, can I still carry out work? I've got my AM2 and level 3 from college. In order for you to be registered as a QS, or so therefore if you're looking at becoming a sole trader and having your business certified, so you would be the QS, you are going to need an initial verification qualification to be able to do it, because you that's part of proving your competence, that you can test, inspect, you can record the information, and most importantly you can verify the results to see if they're compliant or not. So you are going to need a 2391 initial verification if what you're looking at is domestic installer scheme status, where you're just providing electrical installations into domestic properties in association with Part P of building regs. If you wanted to do more, so you want to get into condition reporting, then you would need to do the periodic inspection side of your test and inspect as well. So yeah, that might guide you as to whether you're looking to do a combined test and inspect course, or whether you just want to do the initial verification to get into that level where you're just doing installs without doing periodic inspection. Would you guys add anything else to that?
I was going to say, for the individual, if they've done what is an NVQ, sometimes, and you're going for domestic installer, sometimes within the NVQ, there is a module, there's an initial verification level 3 module that you would have completed it. So that is just seen as the equivalent. So that would cover your initial verification. But if you were going for approved, you would still need to do a separate periodic on top of that in order to top that up. It's important to make sure that the NVQ itself is on the map as well, because the NVQs that they list will contain the level 3 proof that there's a level 3 module in it. That all of that information's on the EAS qualifications checker.
Yeah, good point. So yeah, although you've mentioned that you've got a level 3, just check the full details of that level 3 qual, because as Rich says, it may include the initial verification aspect, in which case you would have everything that you're good to go to arrange for an assessment for domestic installer scheme. Okay, another one. Someone's asked, on an EICR, when cables are installed with reference method 101, so that's on plasterboard ceiling or touching the joist, but with insulation exceeding 100 mm in thickness, they've said it's on a protective device exceeding the current carrying capacity of that cable. Does this warrant a classification code? So I think we'd need a little bit more information, because, for example, if the cable's supplying a fixed load and the load ensures that you never exceed the current carrying capacity of the cable, then that's acceptable, and the protective device just needs to provide fault protection because you've got overload by the fixed load. So yeah, possibly. I think the other telltale things would be, signs of thermal damage to the cable, that it is carrying too much current, would be something to investigate a little bit further. But yeah, straight off the bat, because the protective device isn't providing overload protection, that's not necessarily potentially dangerous, because, as we say, it could be that there's another method of ensuring that cable's not going to overload. For example, it's got a fixed device on the end. So yeah, perhaps a little bit more information, we might be able to go a bit further, but based on what you're saying, it doesn't warrant a classification code. It just needs a little bit more investigation to determine whether it's safe continued use or not. Would you guys add any more to that?
Yeah, only that. I think you're right with a fixed load.
Yeah.
Let's say, for instance, it's one out of equipment and it's a fixed load, and it's unlikely to exceed what the fixed load is drawing. Where it's on things like sockets, and of course, as I said, the design current can't be rated greater than the cable anyway. So where it's on sockets and things like that, where it could be variable, that you've now got to look that it can be overloaded by what you're sort of putting on. So it's one of these. It's a little bit more information. I think you're quite right. It's sort of needed. It's okay to sort of throw in something which is generic, but it's going to be that's a case by case answer. It's hard to say yes or no.
Yeah, I think. But what Sam's talking about, what you're talking about, Sam, is that 433.3.1 reg for emission of protection against overload, and it'll be ident 2. So for the person that's put that question in, have a look at 433.3.1 ident 2, where the characteristics of the load could actually not cause an overload situation.
Yeah. Another one that's come into the pot tonight: when calculating maximum demand for an 80-bedroom hotel with electric heating and water heating, can diversity be applied to the results when applying for the utility supply? They've gone on, Sam, questioning the figure the design consultant has provided, as it's below what I've calculated. So, yeah, off the bat, absolutely diversity can be applied. 7671 tells us that when we're determining maximum demand, we can apply diversity. And I think there are standard tables for installations such as hotels that would give us guidance. One thing I would say is, because you've mentioned that they're questioning the figure of the design consultant because it's below what I've calculated, there are lots of different methods, so there isn't a fixed method. And when we've done some investigation in this in the past, the method, for example, that the DNOs use in order to size the cables supplying consumer installations always results much lower than our typical ones. So yeah, first part of the question, absolutely, diversity can be applied when determining maximum demand, and I would suggest, if it's possible, if you can, just talk to the designer to see what method they've used, and then record that, because that's really useful. There's lots of ways, including measurement, but you're probably at the stage where you can't measure anything because this is all at design. Nothing's been installed yet, which means you can't use measurement. But another thing we always suggest when recording maximum demand is let the people know how it's been determined, so that next time round the next person can use the same method. So if you have calculated it, let them know, so that when they come to calculate the next one, because they're adding to that installation, they can use the same method. But yeah, first thought is you can definitely use diversity. There are a number of different methods. I mean, if you look at in the design guide, there's some advice and guidance. I know in the site guide as well, there's some diversity factors for standard circuits and typical installations. So yeah, but we're always surprised when we do a bit of a calc and then the DNO come and say this is what we're sizing our cable in, and it's always under what we would do for the installation.
Yeah.
You guys add anything? Well, it's calculating maximum demand. I've heard it described as it's an art rather than a science, because there isn't a fixed way.
It's a bit of a dark art, isn't it? I mean, if you know sort of equipment levels, that's a good place to start, because you can work backwards from knowing what sort of appliances are going in. Did you mention it was a hotel, Sam?
Yeah.
So
80-bedroom hotel.
80-bedroom hotel. So if you can get, the spec list for all of the appliances that are going in, I mean, if any, I mean, there may be a kettle, but what I'm trying to say is you would use that information, but it's worth finding out from the designer how they've arrived at it. Sam mentioned in the design guide, you've got tables, you've got standard tables, but they also use what another method is called the PMAX method, where you apply an overall factor, one factor to the overall amount. So you could work out your basic diversity, and it's very much a desktop exercise. I mean, it can normally involve a sort of Excel spreadsheet, and you're fiddling around with the numbers to sort of see where that gets you, and thinking about a realistic diversity, you know, and then you just see where you go from that. And then, as I say, you could add an overall factor to the overall amount after you've played around with some diversity tables.
Yeah, and you know, it could be as simple as the designer's got experience and they know from the last 80 bedroom hotel they did with electric heating and electric water heating, because it's now been built and they've got an intake room where they've got metering, that they may be able to even as simple as that. So there's lots of different ways of achieving an acceptable result. So yeah, don't be too concerned that it's different from what they're saying, but perhaps let them know how you've calculated it and ask them to explain how they've calculated it. But yeah, both could be acceptable for different reasons. We've got some great questions coming in. So there's another one. An installation with multiple various 16 amp commando socket outlets that are on a 16 amp radial circuit, with each one fused down via a 13 amp fused connection unit. It does the person's gone on to say it seems a poor choice, but anything wrong with this? See it quite a lot and don't get why this would be done. Anything against it? Well, what we're missing there is what's the current rating of the cable, and what's the current rating of the circuit protective device, because we've got 13 amp protecting each of the socket outlets, so that they're being limited from what they can draw, but it's the radial circuit. We need to make sure that cable is protected adequately as well, in particular from overload if you've got multiple sockets on the radial circuit. Anything else that you guys can think? It's one of them ones where we'd love to see a drawing and a little bit more information.
Yeah, I mean, Appendix 15 gives you sort of
good shout, yeah,
an idea, doesn't it? And it said, you know, so that could be a place to look at. But as you say, Sam, there's not really a great deal of information on that. I mean, obviously you need to consider if it's a long circuit, things such as volt drop, wouldn't you? Because, you know, it's all well and good sizing the cable for the, you know, maximum load, but unless you can get your volt drop right, then pretty much not much else works, does it? That can be a limiting factor.
Yeah, I was going to mention Appendix 15 myself there. It shows conventional and non-conventional, and even where things might be spurred off, and the fact that they then talk about the cable rate, where you've dropped the cable size, you've fused down and things like that. It's just about overloading the actual cable, the cable running over its operating temperature and maximum operating temperature, and for how long, and particularly with fusing factor as well. So at the origin of that circuit, let's just say, for instance, it could be that they put a 16 amp MCB on it, and the cable, for instance, is 2.5. I would have argued that would have been okay. It's just that the fact that when you start to plug things in, it's gonna knock the fuse out anyway. Was it designed to take all of those points?
Yeah.
But is it going to do damage is the next thing. More inconvenience there.
Yeah, if they've got multiple sockets, is it because they need them all simultaneously, or is it just for convenience of location? So yeah, it doesn't ring any alarm bells immediately, so long as the protective device and the cable are matched properly.
Yeah.
Another one that I'm going to hold my hand up and say I don't know the answer to. Not an unusual thing, I know, but so somebody's ordered a new 400 amp three-phase supply, and they've asked us does any distribution circuit that's over 100 amp need to have additional CT metering to comply with current regs? They go on to say, couldn't find anything in the book. Client's technical has brought it to our attention. My first thought is that's not a 7671 requirement to have CT monitoring, but it might be either a DNO or an energy provider's requirement. So perhaps go back and find out where it's come from. But I'm pretty sure it's not a 7671 requirement, but it could be down to the DNO or the energy provider. Any thoughts there, gents?
No, I was thinking the same. Sorry, Rich. I was thinking the same. It sounds like it's a DNO for certain types of connections to certain types of three-phase supply. That's what it sounds like to me, because they often talk about CT metering chambers, don't they? Yeah, over to you, Rich.
No, again, that's about, for me, it's about monitoring, and that would then be the provider who's given that as a specification. I can't recall seeing anything like that in BS 7671. In actual fact, I can't recall seeing anything like that in the electricity supply quality continuities regs, because it's not specific like that. It's do's and don'ts. So where that has come from, it's more than likely a provider's spec, and of course, you do need to consult these sort of things in the same way as you're advised to look at manufacturer's instructions. BS 7671. You've got to factor all of these things in.
Yeah. So I think it's a question to go back. It could be for a lot of reasons that that they've sometimes energy providers will provide you with a supply, providing you stay within a particular threshold, and they charge you premiums for going over it. So I've been aware of installations like that. So it could be something to do with that. 403 amp, it isn't huge these days. A large domestic might warrant that if we've got lots of things like heat pumps, EV. We don't believe it's a 7671 requirement. We're 99.9% sure on that. But yeah, it could well be either the energy providers or the DNO's requirement. Another good question. In a commercial office environment, is it acceptable that a consumer unit supplying circuits, including for a nearby toilet, has been installed above the grid ceiling? What's our thoughts there?
Quality and standard of maintenance is what I would say. How are you going to? You've got to reset things. Who's what? It's all about a risk assessment there.
Yeah, and also possibly isolation, because quite often we use the protective devices in the consumer unit as our means of isolation for that circuit, and the general principles of 7671 says that means of isolation should be suitably placed. So if we've got things like fans that could involve entrapment, then the isolation for that device needs to be suitably placed, and you're not going to want people ferreting around getting a steps out and poking about above the ceiling. So
did you say that the consumer unit's up there as well?
Yes.
Was this?
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So all right. So accessibility then 132.12. Because equipment's got to be accessible for operation, maintenance, repair, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the first reg that springs to mind for me. And also, because if it's up at high level, then straight away that involves working at height, doesn't it? That could implicate, a health and safety issue to maintain that equipment.
Yeah, so I think we'd have concerns straight off the bat, and depending upon what it's supplying, it could be that we would we would say that it's not. Okay, sorry, yeah, I'm just watching the questions are coming in, but then one will be from an extra bit from a previous one. So that, you look at it and you think that doesn't make sense, but then you realise it's coming from a previous. So one other one that I thought was worth doing, and then we might have to call it a night for our hour. They've got an existing commercial unit, so this isn't the same one. Can you take a sub-main to a distribution board without an earth and earth the said board with an external earth stake? Therefore, the circuits on this new board are earthed directly to the ground without using the electrical earth. My initial concern was parallel earth paths. Well, you can't create two different earthing arrangements in the same installation without separating them. And without ensuring that people haven't got simultaneous access to that. So, it's thoughts on that. You know, we can't just, if we haven't got an earth provided by a distribution board, it's not always as simple as just banging an earth electrode and converting all the outgoing side of that distribution board to a TT. Any thoughts on that one?
It's one of these where I think they're looking at TT and transportation. So I think need a bit more information on that, to be quite honest. It's not just a straightforward yes or no.
And certainly the thing that springs to mind with me is that if let's say the rest of the installation is TNS or TNCS, then you can't have people, and you convert the outgoing circuits from that board to TT. There mustn't be the possibility of people simultaneously accessing two different earthing systems. So depending upon how the circuit arrangements are and the location, you can't be touching an exposed conductive part connected to one earthing system while at the same time have an extraneous or exposed conductive part connected to a different earthing system, because if there then was a potential difference, the person seeing those, and you haven't fulfilled your requirements for creating an equipotential zone. We get it quite a lot, you know, when people are thinking about I've got to provide an earth to something, so I'll just bang a rod in. It's not as simple as that. You certainly can't. DNOs get upset if they've given you a TNCS or a TNS supply and you bang an earth electrode in to change it. It's not as simple as that. You parallel earth paths also, that's what the caller has said that they're concerns, but certainly my first thought was preventing simultaneous access to two different earthing systems.
Was that the sub-main supplying this other board, Sam?
Yeah, it said, can you take a sub-main without an earth and then earth the said board with an external earth stake?
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, again, there's questions needing to be asked about the sub-main cable, isn't there? If that needs to rely on ADS, then earthing forms part of ADS, doesn't it? So, you know, if that cable needs to be protected by ADS, then so there's, as Rich says, there's a bit more info needed.
No, that's a good point in that, you know, so that there's another question. What's my method of protection for that distribution circuit?
It definitely needs a little bit more. What type of cable it is? How's it run?
Okay.
Can't answer yes or no on that.
All right, we'll finish off with one that we often get asked. So we'll just bring that one up. So, common question that we get often: is there a regulation which tells us how high a socket outlet should be installed above the floor or above a kitchen worktop? What's our thoughts on that one?
I don't believe there's a specific reg. It's really about operation particularly if it's a plug. So getting it in and out safely without doing damage to the cord sets.
Yeah.
And sort of operation in the same way as this thing about it being close to a sink. Whatever, they don't give specifics.
Yeah.
You'll find it in other information, but not necessarily BS7671.
No, there's the electrician's guide to the building regs, isn't there? And there's that nice picture in there of the kitchen with the hob and the oven and all that. And it doesn't show a distance from the floor, up, but it mentions 150 mil from a countertop. But it doesn't specify whether it's from 150 mil to the bottom or the top of the socket. But as Richard said, there's in 7671, it just says the socket has to be placed suitably high enough to prevent sort of damage to either the plug or the cord when you're plugging it into that socket. So, there's some engineering judgment needed there by whoever's installing it, that it's at a sufficient enough height.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm sure, like me, you've been to places where you've seen upside down sockets installed, specifically because then they're down on the floor. So which is a whole nother scenario. But yeah, there's no regulation that gives a dimension. Generally, 100 mil above a worktop or floor should give you enough space to be able to plug and unplug the socket without it. Okay, some great questions. We've run out of time as per usual, so just a bit of housekeeping at the end. If you're looking at, as one of our early question callers was talking about, going out on their own and getting certified, if that's something that you are looking at doing, please do go to the NICEIC website to have a look at the schemes. Electrotechnical wise, you'd be looking at domestic installer or approved contractor, but there are also schemes for the rented sector as well. We've got some training offerings, and at the moment we've got some offers, 10% off NICEIC for NICEIC certified businesses and 20% off all e-learning courses. So there's a range of those that come. Again, please do go to the website and have a look. Thanks very much for everyone's input into tonight. We had some great questions, and do apologise if we didn't get round to answering your question, but what we'll do is we'll hoover that up at the start of the next one. And as you can see on the screen there, we'll be doing it back to our Thursday nights. We moved it forward tonight just because we thought, as it's the bank holiday on Friday, everybody might be wanting to get away early on a Thursday, so we moved it to Wednesday. But when we go back to May, we'll be back to the first Thursday of the month, so we're live again Thursday the 7th of May. That will be an interesting one because it will be the first one after Amendment 4 has been published. We're all eagerly awaiting Amendment 4. It's 2 weeks today, 15th of April. So yeah, thanks very much. Any closing thoughts from you guys?
Might have to get some orange livery, I think.
Yeah. No, looking forward to the release of the Amendment 4, and then we can start to find out a bit more about it, and in turn be able to give the advice to our customers, our contractors. So in the meantime, going to enjoy Easter.
Yeah, certainly do. Well, thanks very much, Rich, and thanks, Mark, for joining us tonight. Thanks to everybody in the audience, in particular those that put their questions in. Some really good questions, generating good discussion tonight. And as I say, apologies if we didn't get round to answering yours, but we'll bring those forward to next time round. Thanks very much.
Cheers, guys.